Legislative Affairs Committee to order. It is July 13th. Councilors present are Councilor Schultz, Van Hazinga, President Zarella, and myself, Vice President Walsh. My understanding is that Councilor Kuchar is on his way. I ask anyone in the audience who is recording this meeting to please identify themselves for the record now by standing and stating their name and address. Seeing none, we will continue. FATV is recording and broadcasting this meeting. You should be aware of that. If there's anyone in the audience who wishes to address this body, they may do so at this time. You can speak on any item appearing on the agenda for not more than 2 minutes. When you do speak, and I know for the second petition, we're going to take these out of order. We're going to take 04621 second. We'll take 13621 first. For those people who wish to address 04621, the naming of the legislative building, if you'd like to wait and speak when we take that under advisement, you may do so at that time. Okay. At that time, please give your name and address, and then you have about 2 minutes to speak. All right, thank you. So we'll first take 13621, and City Solicitor Pusateri is here, and I'm going to read the amended petition, if that meets with your approval.
Yes, please.
Make sure I read the right one. Okay. I want to make sure I have the correct one.
I may
and I'm
have
not
a
sure that
version of it on my phone.
Pardon me? I think the amended one has 4 paragraphs instead of 3.
Yes, can I read it to you, please?
You may read it.
Thank you so much. To the Honorable City Council of the City of Fitchburg, the undersigned petitions your honorable body to appoint a certain special counsel as special municipal employees, including bankruptcy counsel. For reasons says the best practice is to identify a position as special municipal counsel to allow individuals and their firms flexibility in the representation of clients while still being able to zealously advocate for the city's interest. For further reasons says it is common that firms require this as a condition precedent before being engaged by the city. For further reasons, or should say for final reasons, says that the city would benefit from a relationship with competent bankruptcy counsel to review bankruptcy petitions served upon the city from time to time. The city has already appropriated funds for the purposes of hiring special counsel. If I may continue.
And would you please?
First, I'd like to apologize for my tardiness. There was some confusion on my part whether or not I was required to appear to make this presentation, and I had thought that this matter was already resolved with your committee, and apparently that was not correct thinking, so I want to apologize. I also want to apologize for my appearance. Typically, I try to keep up pace with Attorney Zarella. And I don't have my...
It's a tough job. It's a tough job.
It's very difficult. I do pretty good most of the time, but... there is, so let's just discuss, typically, the office is receiving, I don't even have an average number, but sometimes we receive a flow of bankruptcy petitions. Many times they're for de minimis amounts of money and they're not worth investigating. Other times it's something that we want to file a notice that the city has a claim and then somehow participate or oversee the action. I don't really have the area of specialty, and matter of fact, one of the very first things I did during the transition was met with the prior solicitor and other bankruptcy counsel, and we began this process of engaging someone to do this. Joseph Baldaga is an attorney at Myrick O'Connell. He's a bankruptcy trustee. He's got decades of experience in bankruptcy, and I've been sending some things to him for him to discuss. I do want to have his full attention to review these. In other words, I'd like him to feel that he could bill me, or the city. The biggest bankruptcy we have going on right now runs in connection with the opioid litigation. We've all heard about the defendants, and some of the defendants in those cases filing for bankruptcy. Certainly that's beyond my very novice understanding of bankruptcy law. And so I do want to have them engaged for those purposes and for any rudimentary purpose. The special municipal employee is something that the folks at Myrick O'Connell and some of the bigger firms really do require us to have for before they begin to represent the city. And I've been thinking that I should have it as a general practice to review annually when I make my budget request for special counsel to identify those particular types so that it's easier for me to hire really the most competent and the larger firms, because I think that we're getting best service from those folks. I was going to do a generalized one, but I think specifically what I really need right now is just the bankruptcy. But I think as we move forward, you may see from the department more of these requests. I don't think that there's a problem allowing firms the opportunity to represent individuals against the city. If, for example, they're helping us with a bankruptcy, and then some other lawyer in their firm is hired by an individual who might have a zoning case and wants to come in front of the zoning board, or maybe even appeal the zoning board. So those are the types of flexibilities that we're looking to have for firms to be identified as special counsel. And in this case, it will be just the bankruptcy. I just will speak to the amendment now, if I may. And when I initially drafted this, my thinking was to have it specific to the individual. Attorney Baldiga informed me that best practice is to identify the area. So a bankruptcy attorney would be the special counsel. So if I did want to hire a different bankruptcy attorney, much to his credit, I could discharge the gentleman and I could hire another firm to represent the city in a bankruptcy case. It is the best practice to identify it by position and not by individual.
Okay.
And I'm certainly available for any questions.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Pusateri. I think that President Zarella and certainly Councilor Kuchar will attest to the fact, as I can, that bankruptcy practice is a specific area that requires a specific amount of expertise, and that this is probably the best way to go. It makes that process easier when these arise. You don't have to every time sort of reinvent the wheel. So I'm not speaking for either one of them, but if I will open it up to the council if they have questions or comments. Councilor Kuchar.
Thank you. Yes, going off of what Councilor Walsh was saying, bankruptcy is its own individual field, and it's very unique. Not to mention, through the course of my my legal career, I have gone toe-to-toe with Myrick O'Connell. It used to be Myrick O'Connell and Shea, from my memory. I guess I'm dating myself, and they've expanded. They have a spectacular reputation, even though I've gone toe-to-toe with them. Yeah, I would be all in favor of this.
Thank you.
Councilors, President Zarella.
Just for the benefit of both the non-attorneys on the committee and also the general public, I just want to clarify that among a few other minor things, the basic effect of what we're being asked to vote on today is, as Solicitor Pusateri alluded to in passing, to enable this, this individual and any other individual serving this role to both represent the city without disqualifying them or their firm from representing persons who might have business with the city. If we did not give them this designation, they would be disqualified, and there's no reason for that. I mean, it's very common practice to do something like this, and we would not have any concern within the legal profession about, any actual conflict of interest that we might not get the best representation, or that we might expose ourselves to disadvantage in other cases or anything. So I am in favor of this, and I think that it's really a very sort of a no-brainer.
Are there any other, Councilor Schultz?
Yeah, I just had a question about, how this firm is going to be paid. Is there a contract involved? How is that all coming?
Sure, we'll obtain a letter of representation which will explain their fees for services. When you budget money for the law department, you include in there two components. One is labor counsel, and another one will be special counsel or special litigation counsel. I can't remember exactly the name on the budget line item, but it's something to that effect. And they would be paid out of that account. And that would be in part consistent with our practice over the years. So for example, if we had any other case come up that was either outside of an area of expertise or beyond my bandwidth to handle, we would hire that person under that special counsel budget. And that's, so there would be a fee engagement, and then there would be I would submit a AP voucher or to put on the warrant payment of their bills after I review them.
Okay. Thank you.
I also would let you know, just on billing, as I indicated, the gentleman has already given me quite a bit of time on the phone and indicated that that would be his ordinary course would be to, if it's a de minimis matter and it's just a quick phone call, what should I do with this? We haven't been billed historically. Moving forward, though, I mean, some of the bigger things are coming in, and I do want his full attention. And, if that does require us to get billed, I think that it's in our interest to be paying for services. Thank you.
Thank you.
Other comments? No?
Motion to approve?
Second?
I have a motion to approve and second. Speaking to the motion? Seeing none. If there's no objection, we'll take this by unanimous consent. Seeing none, that passes 5-0. And
Thank you for your patience this evening. I greatly appreciate it.
thank you, Solicitor Pusateri, much appreciated. Okay, moving forward, before us we have petition 04621, Councilor Marcus D. Natale to petition that the new Fitchburg City Hall Legislative Building be named the David Clark Legislative Building in honor of former school committee member, City Councilor, WEIM, WPKZ Radio, and FATV sports broadcaster David Clark for his many decades of public service to the city of Fitchburg. We have Councilor D. Natale here to present to give a presentation on his petition. Councilor D. Natale, you may go forward.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the Legislative Affairs Committee. Thank you for once again allowing me to speak before you this evening regarding my petition to name this new legislative building at 700 Main Street after former City Councilor and school committee member David Clark, who passed away earlier this year. Councilor Clark's more than 40 years of dedicated public service to the citizens of Fitchburg more than warrants him being considered for this honor. Since I filed this petition 4 months ago, there has yet to be a single resident or councilor who has provided a single solitary reason for why Councilor Clark does not deserve this honor. Everyone agrees he is worthy of consideration. The hesitation for some rests with the argument that there are many people who have passed that are just as worthy of consideration. In my opinion, this argument is very weak, in that you can make that argument for any situation that involves the naming of any municipal facility or landmark. Of course, there are scores of people worthy of consideration for an honor like this. I stipulate that as it is obvious. But to use this argument as a basis for voting in opposition to my petition would suggest to me that you would then be opposed to any future matter before you that calls for the naming of any structure or landmark, because there are scores of people that are worthy of consideration. Furthermore, I have heard many on the fence stating that Councilor Clark was a great public servant, friend, and I liked him a lot, but what? Name me one reason based on his merits put forward on this petition why he should not be named on this facility. More often than not, a specific structure or landmark to be named after someone has a direct connection to that person. On April 13th, when I was last before you, I stated why I believe Councilor Clark deserves this honor more than anyone else. Put simply, if it were not for Councilor Clark's consistent legislative actions, this building you sit in this evening would not exist. Councilor Clark was on this city council in 2012 when we evacuated next door 718 Main Street. He consistently and routinely voiced support for bringing City Hall back to Main Street because he believes strongly that in doing so it would serve as a catalyst for downtown's revitalization. He said it many times. Councilor Clark casted the deciding vote in January of 2018 for this building to become a reality. Without his vote, this building wouldn't be here. These all represent his direct connection to this facility that, mind you, has never before existed in city's history. This is brand new, never before existed. I know some councilors have spoken publicly about setting up a commission to study this matter. As the petitioner and a voting member of the City Council, I oppose such a commission. I find it unnecessary, cumbersome, and would lead to a free-for-all. How do we determine who gets selected? How many names get put forward? Who's on the committee? How long do we go through this? It's not really been done for any other structure that I can recall in the last 16 years that I've been involved on the City Council. I put before you a candidate for this honor. No one else has. Your vote should be based on the merits of the individual that is named on this petition and not about who else should be considered. On April 13th and April 20th in public session, Councilor Boschman testified that it would be an injustice to name this building after David Clark because of the argument that I mentioned earlier. There's a lot of people that could be considered. It would be unfair to others who are just as deserving, he said. Councilor Squalia agreed with Councilor Boschman's view on April 20th, saying that not only did she agree that it would be an injustice, but that the new building should not be named after, quote, any politician. I strongly disagree with both councilors' characterizations of what this would mean if you voted for this, and the fact that Dave Clark was just a politician. He was much more than that. Councilors, when I put this petition forward, I did so with the most heartfelt of intentions. Councilor Clark has selflessly given so much to the city of Fitchburg, and this would be a fitting tribute to his contributions and belief in what this building represents. I know weeks after filing my petition, Councilor Greed filed a separate petition, a resolution to name the press box at Crocker Field after Councilor Clark. The council unanimously passed this resolution, as did I, and it is now before the school committee as it's their jurisdiction. My concern is that that resolution was filed as a, quote, compromise, and it should not be. You can support both. And by supporting both, it points to how much of a reach Councilor Clark had in this community, both at the sport and school level and at the city level. So I thank you for your time this evening, giving attention to this petition, and I respectfully ask for your vote of support based on the statements that I have just made. And I'm open to answering any questions you may have as a petitioner if that comes before me. Thank you very much.
Do councilors have questions for Councilor Di Natale? At this time, I would prefer to allow public comment to take place, if that would be okay with the councilors on the committee. All right. I would ask that anyone who has a comment to make, if you could please come up to one of the microphones here, state your name and address, and then you have approximately 2 minutes to give your comments.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm speaking, Councilor Hughes, 61 Congress Street, Fitchburg. I'm speaking in behalf and in support of this petition. I'm not here to say no one else deserves recognition. I'm here to say their name wasn't put forward, like former Councilor Clark's name was put forward. So with that being said, I'd ask for you all to consider that, not dismissing anyone else's name, but because their name wasn't put forward. And any councilor, anyone has a right to put a name forward. It's not something that's out of the realm. It's been done all over the state and all over the country. And I just want to echo what Councilor Di Natale said. Councilor Clark has put in over 40 years of service in this city, committed service, faithful service, a man of impeccable integrity, and I think it would be a great honor to do that. Not, as I said, not discounting anyone else, that just as well qualified. But we're talking about Councilor Clark and talking about his service that he rendered to the city. So I ask the council to consider this petition. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hughes.
Hi, I'm Sherry
Welcome.
Clark, 131 Constitution Drive. I have a letter that my daughters wanted me to read, and then I also have something that I had written myself. I'm reading the statement on behalf of myself, my daughters, Caitlin, Courtney, and Kimberly, and all the members of the Clark family who are unable to be with us today. We would like to vocalize our support for Councilor Marcus DiNatale's petition to name the new Fitchburg City Hall Legislative Building the David Clark Legislative Building. Dave Clark was more than just a former school committee member, city councilor, WEIM, WPKZ radio, and FATV sports broadcaster. David embodied everything the city should stand for: kindness, hard work, ethics, camaraderie, empathy. He was a lifelong resident of Fitchburg, and you'd be hard-pressed to find anyone more proud of this or dedicated to this city. Dave loved being involved in all aspects of the Fitchburg community. He always felt a calling to serve the people of Fitchburg. It gave him great joy to be able to help his neighbors and constituents. In 1982, he even went so far as to help earn Fitchburg a spot in the Guinness Book of World Records for the longest softball game while raising money for the Fitchburg Center for Brain-Injured Children. What better representation could there be of this dedication to this community than a literal marathon? These days, you may find many politicians sharing photos of their acts of community service on social media. David did all of these same acts without the performative recognition. I recall driving home one day and spotting Dave on the side of Electric Ave, painting the fence along the sidewalk. Not because anyone had asked him, but because he wanted to. A few years ago, while heading into a grocery store, one of our daughters unexpectedly saw him ringing a bell for the Salvation Army, because that was the kind of person he was. This city has always been permeated by David's goodwill and undeniable presence. He never did what he did for the recognition, and we feel we would be remiss not to take this opportunity to memorialize the man, especially when his vote helped make this legislative building possible. We would like to thank Councilor DiNatale for putting forth this petition and thank the committee for hearing our words. Please consider giving David Clark the praise he has always deserved. As for my own note, I may repeat some things, I'm not sure. I wanted to take the time to tell you about my support for the petition to name this building. He was one of the most honorable men I've ever known. He never did anything for recognition. His actions were always for the betterment of our city. For more than 40 years, he served our city by announcing and promoting school sports at WEIM, now WPKZ, broadcasting call-in shows showcasing local athletes. He coached Little League Baseball and street hockey. He joined with FATV to do play-by-play. He worked for nearly 30 years at Fitchburg State University, helping anyone who asked. Ask anyone who knew him, and you will hear the same comments. Always a gentleman, one of the nicest guys I've ever met, dedicated family man, a true advocate for Fitchburg. Jay felt strongly about helping our city and its citizens, and in following that desire, he ran for a seat on the school committee and then for seats as Ward 1 council and later councilor at large. He took great satisfaction when he could help our neighbors and constituents. Serving in these capacities meant the world to him. He served on the board of directors at FATV and on the Crocker Field Restoration Committee. The love he had for the city was evident in all he did. Anyone who would say he was just a politician didn't know him. If Dave was still with us, he would not want any attention brought to him. He was a humble man. I, on the other hand, feel he deserves to be recognized for everything he did. He earned it. I thank Councilor DiNatale for his petition, and I hope you will support it.
Thank you, Mrs. Clark. Is there anyone else who would like to speak at this time?
Hi, thank you for your time. My name is Mark Clark. I am one of David's brothers. I live at 51 Bear Hill Road in Gardner. And I'm very, very honored that they're trying to name the building, the area after my brother. He was a lifelong resident of Fitchburg, and the only way he got out of Fitchburg was by passing away. He loved Fitchburg, and I hope that you consider the body of work that he created in this area. He started out working at Barney Rosen's, if people remember Barney Rosen's, stuffing boxes for Barney Rosen. And then he moved on to working at the Pro Show. He never wanted to leave Fitchburg. And we knew at an early age growing up that he wanted to be involved in city politics from a very, very young age. And he achieved that dream. He loved it, talked about it all the time, and it's been very, very moving for me to come back into Fitchburg and hear so many people say, so many nice things about him. My neighbor who works in the Fitchburg school system, I didn't know your brother was Dave. I had many conversations with him on many, many issues. Last week, I'm going to church at St. Anthony's, and somebody comes by and said, I'm so sorry to hear about Dave. The work he did with special needs was outstanding. And it's been really eye-opening for me to see the respect that he deserves. He was not a very philanthropic person, because you have to have money for that. He never had it. But the true measure of a person is their character and what they stand for. And I can't think, there's many, many people that I've met over the years, but his character is unreproached. Everybody had, so many people have so many good things to say about him. As kids, my brother and I used to love to listen to him on the radio and never give him the credit that he deserved. We liked to watch him during the meetings and never give him the credit he deserved.
True family members.
But what he's given of himself, and like I said, of his character and the type of person he was, it's what people in the city should strive for. And I think that's why having this honor and having been considered to name this facility after him would be the right thing to do. And I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Clark. Is there anyone else who would like to speak at this time? Okay. Seeing none, I would like to, there was a mention of the accompanying petition by Councilor Green to name the broadcast booth at Crocker Field. I did speak with Pete Stevens, the vice chair of the school committee. He said that it has been before the building needs subcommittee of the school committee, and they are wrestling with similar issues that the city council was discussing at its earlier meeting in April, in that some of the comments were that if you name the broadcast booth after one person, you're, by virtue of naming it after one person, excluding other people. And so they're wrestling with that. They will take that up again sometime in September, I believe. But that's what Mr. Stevens explained, where they were on that. At this time, I'll open it up for comments from the council members, if they wish to comment. President Zarella?
Sure. So This is, by its nature, a tricky position for the council to be in, simply because it is because of the framing, because none of us, I think I can speak for all of my colleagues, but I'll certainly speak for myself in saying that I have absolutely nothing negative to say about Councillor Clark. It was a privilege to serve with him for 2 years on the city council, and I do regard him as an exemplar of public service and of gentlemanly conduct. I admire him. Ultimately, in my mind, though, this petition is not about whether Councillor Clark deserves to be honored. He does, absolutely. The question is what we should do with this building. To me, it's a question of essentially city resources more than any individual. And we only have one legislative building, obviously. We can only name it after one person. Councillor Clark was an excellent person and deserves to be honored by the city that he served. I'm just not certain that this is exactly the right way to do it, simply because the thing that, from what I can tell, speaking with people who've called me about this petition and even hearing supporters and family members here tonight, the things that he poured the most of his time and heart into around the city were not primarily legislative, which is not to detract in any way whatsoever from his legislative service. But when I've talked with people about him, they remember his sports involvement, his civic involvement, his work with various causes around the city. I think there are. I do have to respectfully disagree with the framing of this as simply a question of, is this a good idea or is it not? Because this is something I said as early as my first year on the council. Every decision we make as a city, we have to make it in light of every possible alternative. It's always a question of this or all the other things we're not currently looking at. And I hate that I'm in this position because I don't want to sound like I'm saying anything negative at all about Councillor Clark. I will say as many times as it takes that I admire the man and I have no negative thought in my head about him. I'm not certain that we can say that he was the most significant or influential city councillor of the last however long we want to look back. There are, I think, other ways that we can honor him, and I am not intrinsically opposed to this idea. I am open to changing my mind. I just have concerns that this shouldn't be a question of what we think of Councillor Clark, because I think that is beyond question. It's simply a question of what do we want to do with this building? And is this building the most appropriate way to honor Councillor Dave Clark? I'm not certain that it is, but I am open to being convinced.
Councilor Schultz.
Thank you, Councilor Walsh. I agree with Councilor Di Natale and Councilor Hughes that it isn't a comparison with other people that have served the city over the years. It's just about Mr. Clark. It's about Dave Clark and his service to the city. And a lot of these other people that have been talked about, they had no involvement with this building. This is a new building. This was Dave's vision, that we have a renovated City Hall and a renovated Bank of America building, so we had a city council chambers. So I think this is perfectly in line with something that we should do as a city. And Dave Clark has been put forth by Councilor Di Natale, and I have no problem voting in favor of this petition. And I was ready to do it in April when it was first discussed. So I haven't changed my mind since April. Thank you very much, Councilor Walsh.
Councilor Van Hazinga.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I didn't know Dave well, but I always knew him to be very gentle and friendly and kind person, whether it was meeting him at a public meeting like this, formally, or just running into him in his sweats at the grocery store on the weekend. I think I remember some very long conversations with him about planning board matters in front of the freezer case at Market Basket. Yeah, and it was always great to talk to him, and I've always looked at how he handled himself with patience and thoughtfulness and selflessness as a counselor as a model for how I should serve as a counselor as well, and I always will. I'm very sorry to hear about his passing. I lost my father years ago at a similar age, and I remember it being very difficult. And I remember grappling with how to move forward and how to remember him. And I completely understand the desire to honor his service to the city, not just in the council, but elsewhere. I completely understand putting him forward as an exemplar of how a citizen should act, both towards other people and in contributing to the city. And to that end, if we are going to name the legislative building after someone, I have absolutely no problem with naming it after him. But I am hesitant to name it after anyone at this time, to be completely honest with the situation. I think it does bring up arguments about who is more worthy than others, and I don't think that's fair to his memory or to anybody else. I also don't think it should be determined by coincidences of timing, that it was very unfortunate he passed away this year. And the building is just opening this year. The timing lines up, but I don't think that should be the deciding factor. It should be a decision that stands on its own. So this is something that I am open to revisiting in the future, whenever the dust settles, and we can come together and say that this is the best move to make. But at this time, I'm very hesitant to name it after anybody.
Thank you, Councilor Van Hazinga. Councilor Kuchar.
Thank you very much. Councilor Clark he was the voice and the heart of this city. He did a lot in the legislative sessions, and I agree with Councilor Di Natale. He was one of the ones that had to abandon City Hall. He never liked it. He did vote in favor of the refurbishment of City Hall, which I was all in favor for. And more personally, was one of my elections that I lost. I forget which one it was. But he looked at me and he shook his hand, and he shook my hand, and he said, "Don't give up, kid. Keep on going." I fully support this, 100%, and I completely back Councilor Di Natale's petition. And nothing's going to change my mind from that.
Thank you. I didn't want, I don't think it has been, I didn't want this to be a referendum on Dave Clark and his deserving of honor. Dave is probably the kindest man I have ever met. I had known him, excuse me, in a couple of capacities. I taught at Fitchburg State for a number of years. I saw Dave on campus numerous times. There were some times that we sometimes mixed a little bit of city business with university business while we talked on campus, and I sat next to him for 2 years on the city council. I cannot say a negative thing about Dave. I would like to honor him in some way. I agree with Councilor Van Hazener and Councilor Zarella. I'm hesitant to make this decision at this time with regard to the legislative building. I think that there are other ways that we can honor David Clark, and I think I'm in Councilor Zarella's position where I'm not. I can be convinced, but at this time I don't think I'm ready to do that. And I will turn the floor to Councilor Zarella. He had another comment.
I just wanted to note that I am in agreement with Councilor Van Hazinga in that this is not, I may have given the wrong impression. This is not a question of being hesitant to do this because I think we should name someone else instead. It's a question of hesitance to name anyone. So it is not a question that, you know, I have someone in mind who we should be putting up there instead of Councilor Clark. It's simply that I think it is difficult, if not impossible, to choose any one past councilor and say, this person is the one that we are going to honor in this singular way. But again, I think that he is very deserving of honor, and if I do end up voting against this, it will not be because I have any hesitancy in honoring Dave Clark and his memory and his legacy in this city. It's only a question of means, that's all. So that's where I stand.
Any other comments from the councilors? Councilor Schultz.
Well, I heard a couple of councilors, including Chairperson Walsh and Councilor Zarella, say that they need to be convinced tonight. What would it take to convince you that this is a good this is a good petition? Maybe Councilor DiTanelli can shed some more light on this.
Councilor Zarella.
It's not a question of needing to be convinced in any factual sense. I don't think any of us have any doubt as to the facts of the matter, as to what kind of person Dave Clark was or anything like that. It's just trying to keep an open mind. I don't know what would change my mind, to be honest. I'm just trying to keep my mind open. But I'm trying to be honest about where I currently stand. There isn't any missing information that I feel would be necessary, or, again, any hesitancy that I have about Councilor Clark the man. Again, this is purely a question of means for me. I don't know how many different ways I can put that. And again, this is honestly, I'm agonizing here because I genuinely liked and admired Councilor Clark. I don't want anyone to think that this reflects my opinion of him in any way, shape, or form. It's just my opinion about the naming of public buildings, not my opinion of Councillor Dave Clark.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Di Natale.
I did not, when I filed this, intend to put everyone in a bad position. And I know from the outset that as I said in my statement, folks, you could make this argument for any situation like this, where there's 50 or 150 people that could be considered. I have already expressed multiple ways why he has a direct connection to this facility, and the timing aspect of it, for me, was driven by his passing, but also the fact that it coincided with this facility being opened. I don't think it matters whether if I filed this a month after he passed or 3 years after he passed. My reasons would be the same. So I know everyone is dying to get off the chair of, I don't want this to be a referendum on how I think of the man. But it's about, that's what the petition is. It's to name this facility after someone, and in order to arrive at a decision, you have to assess the merits of that person, which, again, I will reiterate, no one has been able to say why he doesn't deserve it. Everyone has said he does deserve it, but there's a lot of other people who do too, and maybe we just don't name it after anybody. Okay, but this is not unprecedented. We name facilities and landmarks, maybe not this council, but the city as a whole in its history has done this many times. And I've heard people in the past with other facilities and landmarks say to me, well, this person who got named on this is definitely worthy, but, you know, there were 15 other people too. But it's about the person in the sense that that's the person that's been put forward. And I look at it like an appointment that we do for heads of departments or boards and commissions. Why do we vote for those people? Because we're looking at their resume and their credentials, and we're focused on who the mayor chose, and we're picking that person based on their specific credentials. Not who was in the running, not who didn't get it, the person before us. So while I understand that there may be some hesitancy based on that argument, as I said before, the reason why I consider it a weak argument is because you can apply that argument to any situation. So we should just never name buildings or facilities after anybody. That's all. I mean, I didn't want to put you guys in this position, but this is the process. I put forward a name, you have to make a decision. And 99% of the people who have contacted me have no problem with this. Maybe 3 people who contacted me do. But those 3 people said as well, oh yeah, he's definitely in the running. But what about these other people? No one has been able to tell me that if we name this building after this man, that is going to be problematic. I've outlined several reasons why there is a direct link, and his 40 years of service to the city speaks for itself. Understanding that, yes, there are a lot of other people in the city that are well deserving of such an honor, but I think another piece of this, again, that gets lost is this is a new building. This never existed in city's history. And it's not just a simple matter of Dave Clark voting yes for the loan, although that was a big piece of it, since if it wasn't for him, this wouldn't exist. It was what he believed with this facility and tying that into everything else he's done. So I guess I have a differing viewpoint than some of you on looking at this about the person. Maybe I look at it a little differently. I don't consider this a referendum on him per se, but a referendum on his work, his accomplishments, what he's meant to this city. And if you can't say he doesn't deserve it, I don't understand why it wouldn't be passed then. No one has given me a reason why he doesn't deserve to be named on here. Not a single person. Not even the most ardent detractors have given a reason. It's always, there's a scores of other people. So I'm belaboring the point, but I just want to try to assuage some of you that while you don't want it to be a referendum on him individually, unfortunately that's the name that's been put before you. And in my opinion, you should base it on the merits of the candidate. And if there's no reason not to do this, and there is a direct causal link between him and this facility, I don't know what the hesitation is. everyone's made it quite clear here tonight that this is no disrespect to anyone else. This is no disrespect to anyone else that may be considered. This is just what was put forward. So it's either yes, you agree, or no, you don't. And for me, I think you'd be hard-pressed in supporting anybody else down the road, because if you're going to use that as a reason for not voting for this, then you probably wouldn't vote ever again to name anybody anything after anybody. Because there's always 20, 30, 40, 50, 100 people that could be in the running. So I just don't find that argument to be very strong, because you can apply it anywhere. So that's my last comment on it, on the fact that I can't get past the fact that no one's been able to tell me why he doesn't deserve it. And if no one can say why, I don't know what the problem is. I mean, no one's beating the door down here to say, don't do it. I don't think anyone would have any issue with it at all. And yeah, it's a new building. Yeah, it happened recently after his passing, but as I told one constituent who called me and said she thought maybe it was done too fast, I said, well, let the family tell me if it was done too fast. I consulted with them first. All right, I don't care if it's too fast. I think it makes all the more sense because this facility opened 2 months before he passed. And he's the only elected official in the city's history who has passed, who had a direct link to this facility. No one else can say that. So I know the position you're in, and I'm sorry you're in that position. I didn't put this forward to say, okay, let's see who can squirm and who's going to buckle or something. I honestly thought this was going to not have any issue. But for whatever reasons, there apparently is, because of other factors at play, specifically all these other people that could be considered. That's why I'm trying to focus your attention on Dave Clark and not the other 50 people. So base it on him, and no one here has said no. Some have said they need to be convinced, some said they could be convinced, some are on the fence, some aren't. It's your call, obviously, but I just don't, if no one can say why not, I don't see what the problem is. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor President Zarell.
Thank you. The analogy was raised of what we do with appointments. And I think it's good to bring that up, because I think that is actually the critical distinction, is when we vote on an appointment, it is taken for granted that someone will be appointed, and the question is only whether the person brought before us is the right person. That's exactly the distinction I'm trying to make here, is that I'm not hesitant about whether Dave Clark is the right person. I'm hesitant about whether there should be any person, which is not an option we have when there's an appointment in front of us. We can't simply say we're not going to have a whatever, a zoning board member or a whatever. This is the null option often gets overlooked in politics. The option of not doing something at all. It gets framed as do this or do this, but not do either is not really considered sometimes. So I agree. The fact that there are 50 other people who might be worthy of consideration is not necessarily a good reason not to do this. But it might be a good reason. Again, I would agree. If we end up voting against this, I would agree that we should then vote against probably any future effort to name the building after anyone. That's exactly what I'm debating with myself, is whether that is the correct course, to simply vote against naming it after anyone, no matter who it may be. Again, it's not that if this were some other name in the petition, I'd be all in favor. That's not the case. It's not that, some other names that have been put forward, Ron Injemy. If it were Ron Injemy's name on here, I'd have the same concerns, the exact same concerns. That's what I mean when I say this is not about my opinion of Dave Clark. It's about my opinion of whether we should be selecting one person, any one person, to put on this building. That's all. That's all. You could name every city councilor in the history of the city of Fitchburg, and as you go down the list, I would have exactly the same concerns every time. So I don't think that this is a question of this is the name that's been put forward, so we just decide whether this is a good name or not. I think we have to consider, should there be a name? Should there be any? And so again, it's not whether Dave Clark is deserving of this honor. It's whether we should be naming this building after a person. And again, it's got nothing to do with him being just a politician. Of course he wasn't. And to be honest, I don't think that's what my colleague, Councilor Squalia, meant either. I think she meant shouldn't be named after any person. But I'm saying, speaking for myself, my concern is not that we shouldn't name it after a politician, because of course that's not who he was. It's whether we should name it after any person whatsoever. And that's where I'm torn, because I want to do something for him. I don't know if I can do this thing for any person, Dave Clark or anyone else. I want everyone watching this to be clear on that point, that this has nothing to do with not wanting to honor Dave Clark or with wanting to honor someone else more than Dave Clark or anything like that. I mean, if it were taken for granted that the building had to be named after someone, I don't think I'd be having this dilemma. I would have voted in favor of it when it first came in front of the council. Thank you.
Councilor Kuchar.
Thank you. Councilor DiNatale.
Excuse me, Councilor Kuchar. I'd ask everyone in the audience to please keep your comments to yourselves. This isn't a public discussion. All right,
Councilor
Councilor Kuchar.
DiNatale put forward this petition, naming Councilor Clark to be named as the legislative building. There wasn't a rush to the city clerk's office to file petitions. There wasn't a rush to say, oh, this should be the Wallace Legislative Building, or this is the John Fitch Legislative Building, or this is the Crocker Legislative Building. Councilor DiNatale sought out the family, put forward the petition. There's no argument. There's nothing here. There's no alternative person. This is what is put forward in front of us. Nobody has an objection to this, other than, well, we need to be convinced. What's there to be convinced about? This man put his heart and soul into this city, and I have no problem voting for this. And I don't think anybody else should. Anybody else who knew Councilor Clark shouldn't either. That's it.
Thank you, Councilor Schultz.
Councilor Walsh, the other thing I was going to say is Dave's brother, Mark, made a point about saying that Dave never had any money to be philanthropic. And I was thinking that a lot of times buildings are named after people who give huge sums of money to have their name put on a building. Dave didn't have huge sums of money. He was just a humble servant of the people. And he's exactly the type of person you want a building named after, in my opinion. Thank you.
I'll make a motion to approve the petition.
Second.
I have a motion and second. Speaking to the motion? Seeing none, we'll do this by roll call vote. Councilor Kuchar?
Yes.
Councilor Schultz?
Yes.
Councilor Van Hazinga?
No.
Councilor Zarella?
No.
And I am a no. That is 3-2 against. I would just like to say that the report will be sent to the city council next Tuesday. At that time, the arguments can be made to the full council. I would suggest that if you speak with Councilor Di Natale, he can assist you with that. Would that be okay, Councilor?
I'm sorry, what was that?
I said if the family wishes to speak to the full council, you can arrange with them. Thank you. And that is the last item on the agenda.
Motion to adjourn?
Second?
Motion to adjourn second. We are adjourned 8:33.